Newton's Three Laws of Motion by me, Dyke. Newton's third law of motion. The third law states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is an example of Newton's third law of motion. An example of this is in daily life is you jumping. You exert a force on the ground exerts a force on you, which causes you to go upward. Evidence that an object's motion depends on the force and the mass of the object. Newton's second law of motion states that when a force acts on an object, it will cause the object to accelerate. The larger the mass of the object, the larger amount of force will be needed to cause it to accelerate. This law can be written as F equals m times a, or F force equals mass times acceleration. Newton's first law of motion. Newton's first law of motion states an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted on by an unbalanced force. An object in motion continues in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Example of Newton's first law of motion. An example of Newton's first law of motion in daily life is when a bus suddenly starts, the people sitting or standing in the bus will start to fall backward. This is because, of course, of inertia. Newton's second law of motion. Acceleration is produced when a force acts on a mass. The greater the mass of the object being accelerated, the greater the amount of force needed to accelerate the object. Example of Newton's second law of motion. An example of Newton's second law of motion. An example of Newton's second law of motion is, say you're pushing a shopping cart. It is easier for a person to push an empty shopping cart than a full one. Another example of this is pushing a sled down a steep hill. The heavier the sled, the faster it will go. And that was my presentation on Newton's three laws of motion.